You ever been humiliated by your own child? Like the one you raised, fed, sacrificed everything for, turning around and treating you like trash? On my 75th birthday, my son threw my cake on the floor and told me to eat it off the ground. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, and within a week, his name disappeared from every account, every paper, every dollar I owned. Want to know how I did it? Keep watching. My name's Margaret. I'm 75 years old, a retired nurse, and I honestly thought I did everything right as a mom. You know, the kind of mom who puts her kids first always. I raised my son, David, on my own after his father, John, passed away when David was just 10. It was tough, really tough. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes even 3, just to make ends meet. I missed holidays, skipped vacations, wore the same old clothes for years, all to give him a good life, to make sure he never felt like he was missing out because he didn't have a father around. I wanted him to have everything I didn't and more. And for a while, he was a good kid. A really good kid. He was sweet, thoughtful, always bringing me little drawings or picking dandelions from the yard. But somewhere along the way, money, pride, and especially his wife Emma, changed him. They changed him into someone I barely recognized, someone who cared more about appearances and what other people thought than about his own mother. It was a slow change, almost unnoticeable at first, like a tiny crack in a window pane that eventually spreads and shatters the whole thing. My birthday was on a Sunday, a bright, sunny day in late spring. I remember it clearly because I woke up feeling hopeful. I know at 75 you'd think I'd be past all that, but I still had this little flicker of hope that my son would remember, that he'd make an effort. I put on my favorite yellow sweater, the one John bought me years ago, and decided I'd bake my own cake. Chocolate with buttercream frosting, just like the one I used to make for David when he was little. He always loved that cake. I didn't expect a big celebration, no fancy party, no big fuss. Honestly, I just wanted to see my son. I wanted a simple day, a quiet moment, maybe a hug, a shared laugh. Is that too much to ask from your own child on your birthday? Around noon, I got a text. My heart actually fluttered a little when I saw his name pop up on my old flip phone screen. I know I'm old-fashioned, but it works for me. The text read, "Hey Ma, we'll stop by later. Don't make too much food, okay?" That was it. No happy birthday, no emoji, no heart, just logistics. Just a dry, impersonal message. Still, I smiled. A tired, sad smile, but a smile nonetheless. At least he's coming, I thought, trying to push away the sting of disappointment. I told myself to be grateful for small mercies. So I cleaned the house, dusted every surface, even polished the old silver frames with pictures of David as a boy, smiling, his arm around me. I set the dining table with my best china, the set John and I got as a wedding gift. I even made a little dinner, his favorite pot roast, with roasted potatoes and green beans, just like old times. I spent hours in the kitchen, humming old tunes, trying to recapture some of the joy that used to fill this house. I imagined him walking in, seeing the table, smelling the roast, and for a moment, just for a moment, remembering the good old days. By 5 o'clock, he showed up, with his wife, Emma, and 2 of their friends. I wasn't expecting company, and my heart sank a little. This wasn't the quiet family dinner I'd envisioned. This felt like an obligation for him, a quick stop on his way to somewhere more important. But I didn't mind. Or rather, I tried not to mind. I told myself I was just happy they came. Any company was better than none on your birthday, right? "Hey, Mom," he said, barely glancing at me as he scrolled his phone, already distracted, already checked out. Emma hugged me with that fake smile she always had, the one that never quite reached her eyes, the one that made me feel like I was a chore, an inconvenience. And her friends, they didn't even say hello. They just walked in, laughing loudly, talking about some concert tickets, completely ignoring me, the host, the birthday girl. It was as if I was invisible, a piece of furniture in my own home. Still, I stayed kind. I told myself, don't ruin the night, Margaret. It's your birthday. Smile, Margaret, just smile. Don't let them see it gets to you. Dinner was, to put it mildly, awkward. They barely touched the food I'd spent all day preparing. David kept whispering to Emma, smirking, and I could feel their eyes on me sometimes, but I pretended not to notice. I just picked at my pot roast, trying to swallow the lump in my throat, trying to keep my chin up. It was like I was a background character in my own birthday dinner. Every time I tried to make conversation, it just fell flat. They'd give one-word answers, or just turn back to each other, their faces lighting up when they talked about their lives, their friends, their plans that never included me. Finally, I couldn't bear the silence anymore, not that stifling, isolating kind of silence. I brought out the cake. It wasn't fancy, just a small, humble homemade chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Mom" written in shaky icing. I'm not as steady as I used to be, you know. I carried it to the table, my hands trembling slightly, and said softly, trying to sound cheerful, "All right, let's sing, huh?" I put it down gently, hoping for a flicker of recognition, a spark of warmth. No one moved, not an inch. David looked at his wife and laughed, not a kind laugh, but a dismissive, almost mocking laugh. "You really made a cake for yourself?" he asked, his voice dripping with incredulity like it was the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. I froze. My heart sank, a heavy stone in my chest. "Well, yeah," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to trouble you." He rolled his eyes, a full, dramatic eye roll as if I was being utterly ridiculous. "Mom, you're 75. Nobody does this kind of stuff anymore. You could have just ordered something." His tone was condescending, a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment. Emma giggled, covering her mouth with her hand, a theatrical gesture that only made it worse. "It's kind of cute, though," she said, her voice sugary sweet, but laced with a clear edge of mockery. Like a little kid baking in her kitchen. Something inside me cracked. A small, invisible fracture, but a fracture nonetheless. The years of quiet sacrifice, the endless worrying, the hope, it all started to feel like a heavy burden, a weight that was crushing me. But I still smiled. I tried, I said, "It's okay, I'm just happy you're all here." I was lying, of course. I wasn't happy. I was heartbroken. I was trying to hold on to some semblance of dignity, some scrap of control over my emotions. I started to cut the cake, my hand still shaking. I wanted to just disappear, to melt into the floorboards. And that's when it happened. That's when the world shifted, and everything I thought I knew about my son shattered into a million pieces. David stood up. He reached across the table, his hand grasping the plate with the cake. My hand was still on it, and for a second we were both holding it. Our eyes met. His were cold, devoid of any warmth or recognition. Mine, I imagine, were filled with a raw, pleading sadness. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time that night, and the look on his face was one of pure contempt. Then he ripped the plate out of my hand. My fingers, old and frail, couldn't hold on. He held it up for a second, almost like he was showing it off to his friends, to Emma. And he said, his voice loud, clear, and utterly cruel, "You know what, Mom? If you're so hungry for attention, here's your cake." Then he threw it. He actually threw my birthday cake on the floor. Right there in my living room, the room where I had held him as a baby, where we had celebrated countless Christmases, where John and I had built a life together. The cake hit the old Persian rug, the one John's mother had given us, and the frosting splattered across the carpet, onto my shoes, a grotesque, sugary mess. And he said, laughing, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the stunned silence, "Go ahead, Mom, eat it. That's what you wanted, right?" His friends laughed, loudly. Emma didn't even look surprised. She just looked at me with that same fake smile, a glint of triumph in her eyes. I stood there, shaking, trying to keep my composure, trying to breathe. The air felt thick, heavy with humiliation. In that moment, time froze. The silence stretched, unbearable, punctuated only by the fading echoes of their laughter. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap him across the face, to demand to know what kind of monster he had become. I wanted to curl up into a ball and disappear. But something inside me, a tiny, ancient spark of dignity, of self-respect, said, "No, don't give them that satisfaction. Don't let them see you break." So I looked him dead in the eyes. I looked past the sneer, past the cruelty, and into the hollow space where my son used to be. And I said, quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like a hurricane was raging inside me, "David, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then I walked away. I didn't clean up the cake. I didn't say another word. I just turned slowly and walked to my room, the messy cake a silent, sticky accusation in the middle of my living room. I closed the door behind me, and then, finally, I let go. I cried harder than I have in years. I cried for the boy I raised. The boy who used to bring me flowers from the yard, tiny, wilted things he'd picked with his chubby little hands. The boy who used to say, "Mom, you're my hero," his arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Where did he go? What happened to him? What did I do wrong? Was I too strict? Too lenient? Did I give him too much? Not enough. A million questions swirled in my head, each one a fresh stab to my already bleeding heart. The tears flowed until I was exhausted, until there were no more left to cry. I lay there in the dark, the faint smell of chocolate and humiliation still clinging to the air, and eventually, I drifted off into a restless sleep. The next morning, my eyes were swollen, red, and puffy, but my mind, surprisingly, was clear. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stark, cold clarity. The fog of sadness had lifted, replaced by a firm resolve. I made myself a cup of strong black coffee, the kind that scalds your tongue and wakes you up, and sat at the kitchen table. The cake was still on the floor, a brown and white stain on the rug. I looked at it, not with sadness this time, but with a strange sense of detachment. Then I looked at my husband's photo, a framed picture of him smiling, his arm around me, taken on our honeymoon. He had that mischievous twinkle in his eye, the one I loved so much. I whispered, "John, I think it's time." It was time to stop being the endlessly forgiving mother, time to stop letting myself be walked all over. It was time to protect myself, to finally put my own peace first. For years, David's name had been on everything. My house deed, my bank accounts, my life insurance policy. I had added him after John passed away, years ago, thinking it would make things easier when the time came. You know, for when I was gone. I wanted to make sure he was taken care of, that he wouldn't have to worry. I thought I was being responsible, loving, forward-thinking. But that morning, as I looked at the smeared cake on my floor and remembered his cruel words, I realized I'd made a mistake. A colossal, painful mistake. I hadn't made things easier for him. I had enabled his sense of entitlement, his belief that he deserved everything without lifting a finger. I had unwittingly given him a license to treat me however he pleased, because, in his mind, he had already secured his inheritance. So with a steady hand, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. He's known me for decades, a kind, no-nonsense man who had helped me buy my house with John, helped me settle John's estate after he passed, all of it. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm and professional. "Margaret, is everything okay?" he asked, sensing something in my tone, I suppose. And I said, my voice firm, devoid of the tears from the night before, "Not yet, Mr. Reynolds, but it will be. Can I come in this morning?" By noon, I was sitting in his office, a folder full of documents spread out on his polished mahogany desk. We went through every single account, every policy, every piece of paper that had David's name on it. It was a methodical, almost clinical process. Joint checking account, removed David's name. Savings account, removed. The deed to my house, transferred fully to my name, making sure there was no ambiguity, no possibility of him claiming it. My life insurance policy, the one meant to secure his future, the beneficiary was changed. Not to another relative, not to another person, but to a children's hospital in town. A place where the money would genuinely help those in need, those who truly deserved it. Every time I signed a paper, every time I put my shaky signature on a line, I felt lighter. It was like I was cutting invisible ropes that had been strangling me for years, ropes that tied me to a past that no longer served me, ropes that had allowed my son to take me for granted. It wasn't about anger anymore, not purely. It was about liberation. It was about taking back control of my own life, my own dignity, my own future. When we finished, after what felt like hours of signing and initialing, Mr. Reynolds looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression serious. "You're sure about this, Margaret?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Once it's done, it's done. There's no turning back." And I looked him straight in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "He threw my birthday cake on the floor and told me to eat it, Mr. Reynolds," I said. "He humiliated me in front of strangers, I'm more than sure." He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the pain and the resolve in my voice. He understood, and he filed everything that afternoon. By evening, David's name was gone, from every legal, financial, and personal document I owned. It was as if he had been meticulously erased, brick by painful brick, from the foundation of my life. The slate was clean. 3 days later, the phone rang. I saw David's name on the caller ID, and a small, tight knot formed in my stomach. But it wasn't fear or sadness this time. It was anticipation. I let it ring twice, then picked up, my voice calm, almost serene. He sounded panicked, frantic, his voice laced with confusion and a hint of accusation. "Mom, my debit card isn't working. Did the bank mess up something with the joint account? All my cards are getting declined." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my chamomile tea. The scent was soothing, a stark contrast to the chaos in his voice. "Oh, David," I said, my voice even, "there's no joint account anymore." "What do you mean?" he stammered, his panic growing. "What do you mean, no joint account? It's always been there." I mean, you don't have access to my money anymore, David, I explained patiently as if discussing the weather. Not a cent. Everything has been changed. He laughed nervously, a strained, disbelieving sound. Come on, Mom, stop joking. This isn't funny. I need that money. My transaction just got declined at the gas station. I'm not joking, David, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. You wanted me to eat off the floor. You made a spectacle of me on my birthday. Now you can figure out how to pay your own bills. He went silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the dawning realization of what I had done. Then, the silence shattered as he exploded. His voice rose, filled with a raw, ugly fury. You can't do that. That money's supposed to be mine one day. You promised. You can't just cut me off like this. Not anymore, I said, cutting him off, my voice steely. I found better people to leave it to, people who don't throw cake on the floor and tell their mother to eat it. People who actually need it and who would appreciate it. People who would never dream of treating another human being the way you treated me. Then I hung up. I didn't wait for his reply, didn't listen to his inevitable torrent of insults. I just pressed the end call button, a sense of quiet triumph washing over me. That same week, I took further steps. I changed the locks on my house, replacing the old ones with new, secure ones. It was a symbolic gesture, I suppose, but also a practical one. He wouldn't be walking in and out of my life as he pleased anymore. I told my lawyer to send a formal notice, a legal document confirming the removal of his name from all estate documents, making it unequivocally clear that he was no longer an heir. I even updated my emergency contacts, removing his name and replacing it with a trusted neighbor and a good friend. Every trace of him, every official link, every assumed right gone. It was a complete and total severance. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Children's Hospital, a beautifully worded thank you note acknowledging my future contribution. It spoke of hope, of helping sick children, of making a real difference. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile. Not because I'd gotten revenge in the malicious sense, not because I reveled in his misfortune, but because I'd gotten something far more valuable. I'd gotten peace. A deep, profound sense of peace. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future. I had chosen self-preservation over endless, unappreciated sacrifice, and that, in itself, felt like the greatest victory. I haven't heard much from David since then. A few angry, rambling texts, full of accusations and self-pity. He said I ruined his life, that I was ungrateful for all he'd done. But what had he done, really? What had he actually done for me, his mother, that warranted such a sense of entitlement? I raised him. I gave him everything I had and more. I sacrificed my youth, my comfort, my dreams, all for his well-being. And he just forgot what love looks like when it stops being convenient. He forgot what respect means when it costs him something. He forgot the years of tireless devotion, reducing it all to a transactional expectation of inheritance. I used to think cutting off your own child would hurt forever, that the guilt would eat away at me, that the void would be unbearable. But sometimes, silence is a gift. Sometimes the quiet absence of toxic energy is the most healing thing you can receive. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself, and perhaps even for them, is to let them drown in the mess they created, to force them to face the consequences of their own actions, without a safety net you tirelessly wove for them. It's a harsh lesson, one I never wanted to teach, but one he desperately needed to learn. I don't hate him. No, hate is too strong, too consuming a feeling for someone I carried for 9 months, someone I loved unconditionally for so long. I pray for him. I pray that one day he'll understand, he'll find some humility, some grace. But I also learned something profoundly important that day: love without respect is just self-destruction. It's a one-sided equation that only drains you dry. If you're a parent listening to this, and your child disrespects you, belittles you, or treats you like a burden, please know this: you don't owe anyone your peace. Not even your own blood. You have a right to protect yourself, to demand respect, to live your remaining years with dignity. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. It doesn't always have to be a screaming match or a public spectacle. Sometimes it's just paperwork, a few quiet signatures, and a final, resolute goodbye to a relationship that has become toxic. It's the quiet reclaiming of your life, one document at a time. And if David ever tries to find me, if he ever remembers the mother who stayed up all night for him when he was sick, the mother who cheered him on at every school play, the mother who gave him every ounce of her being, I hope he also remembers the woman who finally stood up for herself. The day he threw her birthday cake on the ground. Don't forget to check out the next video.